Good evening. This is your video for your night before news for your further maths exam that is tomorrow morning. So hopefully this will just give you some tips on how to best prepare yourself for that tomorrow and what you could be looking at this evening revision wise. So the first thing I want to talk about was what's going to be in this exam. I think this is a particularly difficult question for your further maths paper because it could literally be anything. Now, I do want you to remember that sort of 50% of the content is your GCSE maths content, and that could include any of these things. So index rules, algebraic fractions, coordinate geometry, so thinking about midpoints on a line or splitting a line into a ratio, that sort of thing. Equations of circles, forming and solving equations, functions, product rule for counting, algebraic proof, and surds. Now, those are things that you have been revising and preparing for your actual maths GCSE as well. So things that you are pretty strong at anyway, but any sort of higher end topic from your GCSE, particularly algebra based, or a little bit of geometry, could well be in this exam tomorrow. We're going to be able to make some better predictions once we have done the paper 1 exam. That's just going to be the way this goes. Now, it is a non-calculator exam tomorrow, and then your second paper is a calculator exam. And actually a lot of the topics kind of lend themselves to, you could make this a non-calculator question. So there's not anything particularly that definitely will come up because it's non-calculator, except perhaps something maybe like surds. And then there's a very small number of topics that really are limiting because you need that calculator. It will depend on how hard they make the numbers. So for example, like a product rule for counting question, how hard have they made the values in that question for you to work out? Okay. So what about the further maths content then? We've actually now covered quite a lot of further maths content, but there is a couple of things that we haven't done. And therefore, because this is a full mock, there is a potential for some uncovered content to come up. But you shouldn't panic because obviously, again, there's the context there of we know full well that you just haven't seen those topics yet. So for example, matrices, if that comes up, you can largely just ignore that question. I mean, why not give it a go if you've got time? What's the worst that can happen? You're going to get 0 marks if you leave it blank. Maybe there's something there that you think you can sort of work out logically. And then trigonometry, and yes, you have done loads of trigonometry for your maths GCSE. There's just some aspects that we need to cover in further maths that we haven't yet done, involving your exact trig values, but additionally finding some second solutions rather than just getting one answer. So if you did come actually to the maths A-level test today, you've got a little bit of an experience in that. And then working with some trigonometric identities. You know one of those, the fact that tan theta will equal sine theta over cos theta, but there is another one that we use for further maths that we'll learn about later. So in terms of the further maths content that we have done then, we've actually pretty much done everything. We have covered binomial expansion. This is the one topic out of all of those topics that I think actually really possibly could be more suited to the calculator because some of those numbers can be pretty big. There's high powers you've got to raise things to. However, could equally have some nicer numbers and therefore be a non-calculator question. You've got dividing polynomials, so you do your algebraic long division. You've got factor theorem, so please be very mindful if the question says using factor theorem show that this expression is a factor of a second expression. You have to use the factor theorem. You cannot just divide them and show that there's no remainder. And then once you've got, sorry, just before I talk about this one, once you've done your dividing of polynomials and your factor theorem, you may well then be asked to factorise a cubic, because if you can divide, you get left with a linear expression and a quadratic expression. You can then factorise your quadratic expression. You've got domain and range of functions. So that's thinking about your inputs into your function and your outputs into your function. And then sort of as a sub point there, which I don't think is written, was the piecewise functions. So sort of those functions that were made up of several different parts of graphs depending on the domain. We were solving 3 simultaneous equations. Limiting values of sequences we did kind of really briefly in a tutor time session, but it's quite a short topic, so it's just thinking about what would the value of this sequence sort of tend towards if we make n just a massive number. Differentiation, huge topic. We've been doing that for several weeks in a row. So you've got using your power rule to differentiate your functions, differentiation to calculate gradients of curves, determining whether it's an increasing or decreasing function based on the value of that gradient. Finding the equations of tangents and normals. So just remembering really that tangents and normals are just straight lines. So they follow y equals mx plus c. So if you can remember that you'll just find the equation of a straight line and you need to find the gradient and you need a coordinate. It's finding the gradient using differentiation. For a tangent, it's just the gradient of the curve at that point, but for a normal, that's perpendicular, so you need to find that negative reciprocal. We also had to find the second derivative, so differentiating for a second time, and how we could use that to determine the nature of the stationary point. So is it a maximum or is it a minimum? And finally, we had applied differentiation. So using differentiation in a sort of larger question where you might have to do a little bit of algebraic manipulation to start in a context of perimeter, area, volume, but then differentiating and using that to find the maximum area for something or the minimum volume for something. So what can you do this evening? Well, the first thing you should probably do is go on Arbor, because on Arbor you've got all of those previous lessons. I've made sure to upload those every single Monday. You'll have the lesson slides. There's a link to a video that will explain things to you. And there is also some exam practice questions as well with solutions. So everything we've ever done on Further Maths is in there. Exam questions. So again, sorry, that's part of what I uploaded to Arbor. In each lesson there are exam questions. You've also, if you want to look then at the specific topics, you've got that list on the previous slide now of everything that we have covered. So again, you can use Arbor to find each lesson on the specific topic. You can go onto Sparks Maths. If you go to Independent Learning, you can actually set your curriculum to AQA Level 2 Further Maths, and then you can search for some topics in there. Corbett Maths is great. You have to go to More and then select Further Maths. And then you'll see that you've got all the options for different topics from Further Maths there. And again, you've got videos that will be useful to help you if you need a bit of a hint. You've got practice questions, you've got answers. So tomorrow morning then, because your exam is at 9, the hub will be open from 7. I will make myself available. I'll be around if anybody wants to come in early. I would advise that you bring some questions that you haven't been able to answer, so get some revision done tonight. Anything you can't answer or you didn't understand the mark scheme when you looked at it, or the video is not clear enough, make sure to bring that in with you. Then we'll go into the conservatory or the canteen, and there will be some breakfast mat revision. So I've just taken a snip of the picture there, and we can go through those as answers provided, and again I will be there if you needed any help. We'll go for a line-up at 8:50 and then head on over to the exam. Final advice, similar to what I have said to you and will say to you for your maths exam tomorrow, you should attempt every single question, because you might get a mark or 2. Okay, if you don't attempt it, you're definitely going to get 0. They don't take marks away from you for attempting it and getting it wrong. So you should absolutely attempt every single question, read it carefully, think, how can I get the first mark? Is this something I know from GCSE anyway? Because the answer is probably yes, most of the paper will be. Read the last line of the question before you move on is always a good thing to remember. Check you've actually answered the question. Keep thinking about whether or not your answers were sensible in the context for the question. And use all of the time available. You do have slightly longer for the Further Maths exam. It's 1 hour 45 rather than 1 hour and a half. So please make the most of that. Okay, that's it from me then. So good luck with your final bits of revision tonight, and I will see you in the morning.